Hi, this is Tom from World Class Coaching with another in our series of animated drills. Today I've got a diagram here with our Planet.Training software that works on 3v1, which is a traditional possession activity. It's one probably everybody does. But what I like about this activity is there's also transition involved. So what we have is we have three different areas. I'll usually start these areas being 10 by 10s. It's hard to show it as a square here and still give the space for the players. But I'll usually start with a 10 by 10. There's been times where I've made it a bit wider than it is long, so make it like a 12 by 8. And have three of those areas that are connected. And at the beginning of a training session, I might start this out with just 3v1 possession in 2 or 3 of these areas, or maybe I'll have 2 of these areas set up side by side so I can coach them both. And that creates enough areas for me to, have 4 players in each area. So if you've got 16 players, then it's nice to have 2 of these and have a 3v1 going at each end and have that space in the middle for some open room. But then the next thing I'll do after that, after we've talked about the principles of 3v1 and talking about support and talking about open body shape and all the things you talk about in possession activities, then we'll make this a transition game. So we'll make, you can make the rule different depending on the age and ability level of your players, but generally I'll start out by saying you need to make 3 passes in this zone before you're allowed to then transfer the ball into the other zone. So what we'll do next is we'll have the players that have completed that, then the player with the ball dribbles into that neutral zone area, and one player from the other side, from this side where the ball was on, can then join them at the far end. So, now the goal is to possess it here, but then recognize the moment to transfer it. Now, there may be a time where you can't transfer the ball. Perhaps the defender gets into a position where they're blocking a pass or they're just not allowing you to be able to get out of the area. So using more passes is fine, but they need to make it at least a certain number. But then I want them to recognize that moment to change the play, that moment to transition. And you can look at this in a number of different ways. You can look at this as playing out of the back. So this is your center back, or perhaps even your goalkeeper. These are your center backs, and you're possessing the ball out of the back in order to transition forward into the midfield or into the attacking area. You can look at it like that, or you can take this area and you could even put it to where it's across the field. So now you're talking about possessing the ball on one side of the field and looking for the moment to change it to the other side. So you can put this into the context of what you want to work on. Put it in front of your goal, and you're building out of the back. Put it on the wing, you're attacking up the wing. Put it in front of the opponent's goal, and now you're transitioning out of midfield with a midfield 3 here possessing the ball, and then you're getting into the attack. So there's any number of ways that you can use this. So we'll possess the ball here, we'll transition through dribbling the ball into the other area, and now we'll possess the ball in this area. Now, there's a couple of great progressions you can use depending on your number of players and what you want to focus on. The way I've shown it here is I make the defender start behind the attacker to begin with. So, now I can talk to this attacker about staying as high up the field as possible to create space to come back into. Because if this player is up here, then obviously the defender's allowed to be here. And now there's no room to receive the ball and get into the attack, or at least there's a lot less room to get into this space. So by forcing the defender to stay behind the attacker, you give that attacker the advantage to begin with. Now you can take that off with more experienced players, or as time goes on and the players get better at this activity, you can allow that player, you can allow that defender to come in front. And so then what we're going to want to see is we're going to want to see this attacker then try to find the space, and by moving, checking off to one area and then moving back in to receive the ball in another area. So, making a run to get the defender away and then coming back into the space to receive the ball. So that's one progression that you can have. Another that I really like is to put and we'll just copy this player here, to put a defensive player in this area. So now you've got the transition being defended. So, now if this player is coming out of the area, let's say, and they're dribbling here, and we've got their supporting player making the run here, now instead of passing directly into that other zone, then we'll have the player, switching the ball into the open space, and then this pass will go from the player that was supporting into the attacker in that other zone. So, now we've created some pressure on the transition, so it's not as easy as it was before. So, and you can progress this further by, adding more defenders. You can progress it further by, perhaps even having the attackers be a bit more static. In other words, maybe you've got two players in the far end, and now you've got, the ability to transition is more difficult now because now we've got a 1v1 here. So what will we say? We'll say, instead of saying a player comes out of this area, now we'll say, okay, a player has to come back and check into this space in order to receive the ball or in order to support the player coming out of that back third. So you've got maybe a forward checking back to support the midfield or a defender coming out of the back in order to make that transition possible. So you can change this up in so many different ways. It's a really flexible format, which is one of the reasons I like using it. So I think this is one that if you try this with your team, you'll find that not only are they able to work on their possession, but they'll also kind of understand that moment to go forward and understand those principles of transition as far as breaking down the defense if you've got one defender there and supporting the play, whether you've got a player coming out of the back or whether you have a player coming back to support the ball. So give that a try. Let us know how it goes. Put a comment in the section below and let us know. Thanks a lot.